Good afternoon, Isaac. I will be right back. Hello. Oops, wrong one. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Zachary's upside down. He's a bat. That's how you sleep at night. It's pretty good. I used to do this Halloween event every year in Michigan, where I'm from. And basically, what we would do is there was this large state park that had this like path that went like all through it. And so through the path, we would be dressed up as animals that are native to Michigan and tell like a little fact story, like skit to the kids and then give them Halloween candy. It was like a place for them to go trick or treating and get face painted and also learn about animals. And I was always the bat because I thought the costume was the coolest and the makeup. we're going to wait a couple minutes to hopefully pick up some more people. So while we're waiting, does anybody have any questions? Please remember, and I'm going to keep saying this because there are a lot of people from the other class who didn't do it, that your SLA essays are due tonight at midnight. Okay, so please review that. It is in Schoology, due tonight at midnight. It is your first summative, so you don't want to miss it. So take a look at that now. Well, we've got a couple of minutes, so if you have questions, I can get those answered, and I'm happy to do so while we have some time. So take a look. If you have questions about the SLA essay, these are your moments to ask. It's just a short 300-word essay. I'm not trying to make it difficult for you. Yes, you can keep your camera off if you are having issues with connectivity. We have quite a few people today who are having problems staying connected to Zoom. So it's not just you. In fact, earlier I kept getting the Wi-Fi unstable thing, and I have fiber internet and I'm plugged to the Ethernet. So I don't think it's all us. I mean, some of it's us, but some of it's also Zoom itself is having problems. It's got more people on it than probably ever. All right. While we are waiting, I'm going to give you your due now. Okay. So remember, these are for your journals, right? Which we are keeping track of. You need to go back and look through the due nows to catch up on journal entries, do so. Okay. But I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to just write what you recall about Shakespeare in London. And if you don't remember anything, then talk about that or talk about what you do remember. So there's that to get you started. Give you a couple of minutes to get started on that while I get everything else set up, or do my best to anyway. So 2 minutes and we'll get started on Shakespeare, my favorite. So if you are just joining us, we're getting started on our due now, but you will have time, of course, to work on that and add to it in your journal before you turn it in. Okay, so let's talk a little bit, give you a little refresher on Elizabethan England. And to do so, we got to talk about how we get to Elizabeth, right? So we get to Elizabeth through her father, Henry VIII. And if you know anything about Henry VIII, you know probably that he had 6 wives, right? There's a little song about it about how his wives were divorced, beheaded, and died, divorced, beheaded, survived. So he basically breaks England from the Catholic Church, and his motivation for doing so is that he wants a divorce and the Pope will not grant him one because his wife cannot give him, his first wife can't give him a child. So he wants a divorce because he wants an heir. The Pope says no. And so Henry says, well, then we don't need the Catholic Church. I'm going to make my own church called the Anglican Church. And I'm going to install myself as the head of the Anglican Church. So that's what he does. So he divorces Catherine, his first wife. He marries Anne Boleyn, his second wife. But unfortunately for Anne Boleyn, she is only able to give him daughters, not sons. And one of her daughters is Elizabeth. Catherine was actually instrumental in getting Elizabeth crowned as sort of his heir, actually. So Elizabeth comes to power through her father, Henry VIII. And so you can kind of tell that religion in the country is a little bit of a sore subject, right? Because we've just been sort of forced, the citizens have sort of forced to convert from Catholicism to the Anglican Church. And not everybody's happy about it. And that's going to come up a lot. So, as a result, one of the first rules for the Elizabethan stage is that we're not allowed to have biblical figures allowed on stage. Oops, sorry, I went back. Because Elizabeth was aware of the fact that religion was a sore subject, right? So how do you avoid people fighting about religion and taking it to the theaters? You just make it a law. Not allowed to put any biblical figures on stage, and that way we can avoid that whole problem, right? No female actors. So all female characters were played by usually teenage boys. Public theaters were affordable, where private theaters were expensive and exclusive. So if you were living in London, oh, sorry, Henley changed the slide, during Elizabeth I, you could probably afford to, Rosalind, that's okay. A lot of people are getting logged in and out. If you get logged out, just come back in. Don't worry about it. For everybody, right? If you lived in London during the time of Elizabeth I, the chances were pretty good that you could afford to go to the public theater occasionally because it was that cheap, right? Isaac. So you could go see it. Whereas public theaters, though, that was for the upper class. So, or I'm sorry, private theaters. So public theaters were open air. You could only really use them for part of the year, mostly like during the summer when the weather was nice. Private theaters were closed theaters that were usually used during like the winter time, right? And we also had a common theme was iambic pentameter, which was not actually required by law. However, it was sort of the most common poetic meter of the time. So when we talk about Shakespeare and iambic pentameter, that was what people were sort of accustomed to hearing. And so it was just very popular to use on the British stage during this period. So no ladies, no people from the Bible, public theaters, affordable, private theaters, expensive, and lots of people were using iambic pentameter. Any questions about any of that? Any of this sparking any memories if you took MYP Theater 1? No? Isaac, you okay over there? Yeah? All right. Okay. So the first public theater was built by James Burbage in 1576, and he was very creative when he named it. He just called it theater. That was it. Give me a second. I got to blow my nose. Okay, so he builds theater and it's up for a while. And then there was a problem. And basically, the problem was that the area around where theater was became sort of known for, well, it became sort of a red light district. There were lots of brothels, there were lots of prostitutes, right? And so it wasn't really theater's fault, but people wanted to blame theater for it. And so they put pressure on the Queen to ban theater from within the city limits of London. And so she does. She has to, right? But they're very smart. Theater was built, so okay, this is the river Thames, the River Thames, right? And theater was built like right on one coast of it. What they basically did was they took it down piece by piece. They took it over the river and then used all that lumber on the other side of the river to build the Globe. And now it was outside the city limits of London, even though it was literally just like across the river. So they got around the law pretty sneakily, but it wasn't illegal where it was now. And so they used all the lumber and they built the Globe from the lumber of theater. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So the sneaky, right? They'd already invested all that money, so they just boop, 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 take it down, move it across, build it again. We don't actually have the architecture for the base of the Globe. We thought we'd found it, but we hadn't. What we'd found was the basement part of the Rose, which is the theater that comes next. So we're sort of using that archaeological dig plus documents and drawings of what the Globe really looked like as our best guess as to what the Globe was like. So just to be perfectly honest with you, we don't have, like, if you go to the Globe today in London, they've reconstructed it. There's one in Canada, there's one in Oregon. It's not precise, but it's a pretty good estimation. Okay, so let's talk about the Globe. The Globe Theater held over 3,000 people. Okay, so when I said that everybody could pretty much go, I meant it, right? Admission started at a penny. So I also said it was affordable, right? If you could sort of get one little penny together, you could stand and watch the play. So that was the cheap seats. The people who would stand to watch it, and they were called, and I'm going to put this in the chat, the groundlings. So they would stand to watch the show. Those were the cheap seats. It was frequently closed during the plagues, which we can relate to right now, right? Because the last thing you want to do when people have this very contagious sickness is to cram 3,000 people into a small area, right? So they would close the Globe if there was a plague going on in order to prevent more people from catching it. In 1613, during a performance, I want to say it was a performance of Richard III, they were lighting cannons to make the sound of the cannon going off for the war scene, and it caused the roof to catch fire and the whole thing burned down. So the Globe burns to the ground in 1613. What can you do, right? Like I said, they're going to rebuild a similar structure next. But when we talk about the Globe, because that's sort of the most famous theater that we associate with Shakespeare, it did end up burning down. This is a common problem during like a lot of early theater, especially when we introduce lighting. It's just like stuff burns all the time. Any questions about the globe? Okay, so the globe had minimal scenery. So it really had like more like a thrust stage. So you couldn't take stuff, big scenery on and off. So what they would do was something sort of like you would have a person bring on like a sapling and they would stick it on stage. And then they would tell the audience, we're in a forest, right? And that single little tree is there to remind us of where we are. And then we use our imagination to fill everything else in, right? Or they would have a cannon on stage for a play that involved a lot of wars, and they couldn't really take the cannon on and off. So the audience would just pretend the cannon wasn't there for scenes that didn't involve the cannon, right? So there's a lot of requiring the audience to use their imagination. And we know this because it's actually in the text. If you look at the introduction to Henry V, he literally, like the narrator literally asks the audience, please use your imagination for this play. They would decorate the theater with backdrops to sort of try to give a feeling of what kind of play this was. So like, for instance, for Romeo and Juliet, they might have like starry backdrops because a lot of the play takes place at night, or at least a lot of the really important scenes do, right? So that would sort of help give you an idea. And they did have some special effects. They had, they could use smoke. They could do a thing called a thunder run, which was basically like a cannonball that you would run down this thing that looked like a gutter from a bowling alley, you know, and it would make that like sound, right, to make like thunder strikes. And they would use trap doors. So if you had a character that like came up and, you know, like because they were in a tower, they could do that, or they could have characters that would come from and go into hell. They could do that too. And this is actually a lot of special effects that started in the medieval period, which we skipped over. That was like religious theater, and they brought that with them. We are not yet to the place where we have the ability to do fake blood. They probably could have done something, I would imagine. I don't know what exactly it would have been, but they might have been able to. Like using bladders from or sausage packages, you know, from animals, and like fill that with something that they could like press on. They got pretty inventive, so it wouldn't surprise me. I don't know the specifics of all the special effects. What we are basically taking the, well, we know they had a fake head because they bring the severed head of Macbeth on stage at the end of Macbeth. And for Titus Andronicus, actually, yeah, for Titus Andronicus, one of the women has her hands cut off. So we know they, like, she balled up her hands and they like made it look like they were severed. So she also has her tongue cut out. So I'd imagine you'd put some blood on her for that. There was recently a version of Titus Andronicus that was so gory that people fainted in the audience. Gross, right? Okay. So yeah, types of theaters. No. The actually killing them was in Roman times. We're over that. We're not really murdering anybody on stage anymore. This is all for show. Yeah. In the Roman stage, they might have actually killed people on stage, but in Shakespeare's time, no. This is straight up fake for forever. Okay, so
public versus private. So public theaters were open mostly in the summer times and only when the weather is good. And if you know anything about London, it's not very good all the time. So when they could do a show, they would. And it was able to sit thousands of people. The most predominant example that we have talked about is the Globe Theater, the Rose. I can't remember what Ben Johnson's theater was called, but there were a few. There were like 2 public theaters in London, and it was very affordable. Whereas private theaters were open when the weather was poor. It could sit only a few hundred people, and that's a pretty generous estimation. The one that Shakespeare worked at was called Blackfriars. Now, what does that make you think of? Friar. What does that make you think of? A hen? What else? Sort of related to something we've talked about. Food. F-R-I-A-R. Catholic, yeah, the Catholic Church. Okay, so, right, we had still these structures, these monasteries, these nunneries that were sitting around that weren't being used. So what did they do? They converted them into theaters, right? Because they already had a stage area like the altar. They already had places for people to sit. So some of them were children's theaters, which was very popular at the time. And then some of them, like Blackfriars, became a private theater for people like Shakespeare to perform for the upper class. Good. And so they were expensive and they were exclusive. Good job. You guys are doing great today. You guys remember this, or is it just that you know a little bit more about Shakespeare than some of the other stuff that we've talked about so far? Yeah. A little bit more. Okay, cool. All right, good. So, Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, we're going to talk through this real quick. I'm not going to give you the full like blow by blow. He was born in the merchant class, and we know that in Stratford upon Avon, right? Not in London, but we know that he was born in a merchant class because they had enough money for him to be professionally educated, right? However, after a while, the family ran into some trouble, and we also know that because he left school early to apprentice as a butcher, and that probably wouldn't have happened if they didn't need money, right? At the young age of, I think, 18 or 19, he marries Anne Hathaway, and this is pretty scandalous for a multitude of reasons. Number one, she's several years older than he is. She's also a farmer's daughter, so she's below his station. So the chances are pretty good that they had to get married because she was pregnant. So they have a daughter, and then they have a pair of twins. Yeah, a different Anne Hathaway. Yeah, they have a pair of twins. Hamnet, the son, dies at, I want to say, age 11 of something kind of horrible. But he and Anne Hathaway, he eventually leaves, but they stay married. However, they did not have a very good relationship. And we know this because at his final sort of dig was that he leaves her his second best bed in his will instead of the traditional their marriage bed. We also know this because if you read his sonnets are dedicated a lot to or about 2 specific people. One is called A Dark Lady, and one is implied to be a young man. So Shakespeare was probably bisexual. There you go. He arrived in London and reached pretty quick success. He sort of just hooked up with the right people at the right time, started writing plays, and within like 3 or 4 years of his arrival in London, he is already on stage and having some of his plays performed. So didn't take him long to do well. He wrote historical plays, which were plays about the history of England. They were also primarily written to promote the family of Elizabeth I, as she was the current queen, right? So he's writing to promote her bloodline. And of course, he wrote tragedies and comedies. He primarily wrote in iambic pentameter, which is an iamb is a pair of syllables, one unstressed and one stressed. And penta means 5. So 5 pairs of iambs in a line, meaning that there are 10 syllables in every line. He is a very good playwright, but he is equally as good of a businessman. And I'd say this because he's going to make some pretty crafty deals. And one of the most important deals is going to be Macbeth, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. But so he's not just a playwright. He's not just approaching theater as an artist. He's also thinking about business and staying in with the king and the queen and attempting to sort of always be who the upper class wanted to like have around. So let's talk about some contemporaries of Shakespeare. So we're not just focusing on him. The two that I want to mention are Christopher Marlowe and Ben Jonson. Marlowe actually may have been assassinated. There's some proof that he was probably a spy for the British government, and he officially died during a tavern brawl. But there's some speculation that the brawl may have been staged so that basically somebody could get to him in the brawl and assassinate him because he was like killed with a blade. So Marlowe was killed at a very young age, and a lot of people say that had he lived, it's very possible that he could have been the greatest playwright of the time, not Shakespeare. Ben Jonson was also a great playwright, and he was the primary playwright for the other theatrical company in London, which was called the Lord Admiral's Men. The two of them had a big rivalry. However, they wrote letters back and forth, and Shakespeare actually acted in one of Jonson's plays when he first arrived in London. So, I think it was sort of like a frenemy relationship, right? Professionally, they disagreed, but I think there were a lot of stuff that, personally and professionally, they found interesting about each other. But yeah, Ben Jonson does write kind of a nasty thing about Shakespeare where he makes fun of him for having little Latin and even less Greek, basically implying that Shakespeare didn't finish his education, right? So it's a little mean, but what are you going to do? Okay, so let's talk about our two royalty members here in the time of Shakespeare. The first is Elizabeth I, who was absolutely adored by her subjects. Everybody loved Elizabeth I. She was called the Virgin Queen because she never married. She basically said that she could not put anyone above her dedication to her country. However, she had a long-term lover that pretty much everybody knew about, but he wasn't, he basically like wasn't good enough to be married to her in the eyes of the court. So what are you going to do, right? James is going to end up taking the throne after her, but there's a little bit of tension there because she did imprison James's mother, Mary, Queen of Scots. So, but James goes over it, I guess. Part of the reason why she is so beloved is that she defeated Spain's navy through more than a little help with the weather. But that was sort of the moment where people were like, wow, like God really did choose her to be our queen, and she's going to lead us to prosperity. Under Elizabeth I, Shakespeare's company is called the Lord Chamberlain's Men, right? Not the Queen's Men. They're called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. So that's something I want to make clear to you. So when James comes to power, he's actually the King of Scotland at the time, and he comes to power during a plague. his ascension to the throne is unchallenged, but people are a little nervous about it, right? And it's not a great time for England in general. So James doesn't head right to London. He actually goes to one of the country palaces, and he's like, I'm going to rule from here for a while because the plague is happening, right? So Shakespeare hears this, and he's like, I know what I got to do. We're going to go to him. So the Lord Chamberlain's men, they pack up and they go to the palace where James is, and they perform plays for him. And Shakespeare even writes Macbeth for James. It's the only play of Shakespeare's that takes place in Scotland. And it's all about magic and the occult, right? And James loved that stuff. So, like I said, very smart businessman. So James is like, this is perfect. Everybody who is anybody already loves you. So I'm going to be your new patron. And now under me, you're going to be the kingsman, right? So it's beneficial for both people. Shakespeare stays in with the person in power, and James sort of convinces people, that he's smart by, like Elizabeth chose me, and I'm also going to keep Shakespeare on as one of our court performers. These are smart people here. They're working together. I'm sorry. I know I'm going fast. Does anybody have any questions? Let me take a break. And I find this stuff very interesting, and I know a lot about it. So. Anything that I can answer for you guys? Are we good? Yeah? Okay. All right. Everybody who I can see seems to be telling me we're good. So, just to give you a little bit of heads up of what's going to happen next, James I is succeeded by Charles I, who is unfortunately going to be challenged during the English Civil War. Like I said, there were some people who were not happy about the change from Catholicism to the Anglican Church. And Oliver Cromwell is going to lead them and his army to defeat Charles I, and they behead him in 1649. As a result, Charles II and the English upper class, they get out of Dodge and they flee to France, where they find safety with King Louis XIV. And that will be where we're going to pick up next time. And so he's basically like, yeah, come and party with me. The more the merrier. Let's go, right? And he gives them a place to hide for about 18 years while Charles grows up and amasses an army to come back and take the throne. So that's where we will pick up next time. We're gonna start in France. Ooh. So we're going to skip the OP versus English today. I find it personally very interesting, and we're going to do an activity where in groups, you're going to try to find out which pop song has been Shakespeareized into a sonnet. So we're going to do one together, okay? And then I'm going to put you in groups for you to try to figure out what song this is, okay? So let me grab one. I'm gonna stop my share real quick. Okay, so here's my example. Let me zoom in so that open with Google Docs. There we go. You can actually read it because it's kind of small. Okay. So I'm going to give you this. When you think you know what it is, send me a message. in chat. I feel not like myself when I awake, but nearer to that puffy poet skilled. To clean my teeth, I happily partake in Mr. Daniel's whiskey well distilled. I'll hither not return until the morn, and make the time till then with pleasure filled. We'll have each gorgeous garment of ours worn, each toenail painted, and each bottle swilled. So minstrels, play your songs with volume great, and keep no joyous song from us withheld. Will not our carefree merriment abate till constables have us from here expelled. Although the ticking clock can ne'er be ceased, we'll have our party from its power released. What song do you think that is? What song has been Shakespeareized? Oh, Gabrielle's got it. Yep, Paige has got it. Good. Anybody else? So Gabrielle and Paige, tell us in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, how you figured it out. What did you do?
Oh, you can go,
Go
Gab.
ahead.
Okay. I recognize like the beginning part at first, like
Okay.
I feel not like myself when I awake, and then
Okay.
like the stuff about cleaning her teeth, and I was like, I haven't really heard a song like that recently, but I was thinking back, and then when I read the last two lines about the ticking clock, I kind of put it all together, and then I had to like think about how the song started, and I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Gabrielle, do you have anything to add?
Nope, same.
Okay. So wake up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy, right? Puffy poet, puffy poet skilled. So look for keywords, right? So they write I feel not like myself, and then the whiskey sort of is a clue, and then it says ticking clock, right? And you got to kind of like put the clues together. All right, good job. Okay, so I'm going to put you in some groups, and then I'm going to send you a link to a sonnet to try out. And we've got a little bit of time, okay, for you to. And I'm going to send, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try, instead of, before I went into each like group, this time I think I'm just going to send a private message to one person in each group, and you can share the link. Okay. So let me make you some breakout rooms. Let's do 4. Let's do 5. And then I'm going to make sure. Yeah, I think that'll work. Okay, so I'm going to open the rooms, and I'll send you a sonnet, and you'll have about, let's do like 10 minutes, okay? If you figure it out beforehand, let me know. All right, so here we go. Woo-hoo.
Oh, okay. I can't message. Oh, that's dumb. Okay. Hi. Hello. Hello. I'm going to give you your link and then make sure that you let me know that you can see it. Okay. So there's your link. And can you see that one? Everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's the one that you're working with, and I will return, or if you need help, let me know. How do I go just to the next one? There we go. Okay. Hi, guys. Here's your link. Let me know if you can see it and access it before I go to the next one. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And I will talk to you soon. Hello.
Why?
All right. I'm going to send you your link. Make sure that you guys can see it and access it before I leave because I don't want to. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. Let me know if you need any help. Otherwise, I will talk to you soon.
All right.
Hey guys. All right. Here is your new sonnet to work on. Let me make sure that you can see it and access it before I leave. Can you see it? Okay, great. Perfect. Hey. Okay, I'm going to give you your link. So there's the link to your sonnet. Make sure that you can see it and access it before I leave the room. Can you see it? You here?
I'm waiting for mine to load.
Okay. Evelyn, how about you? Can you see it?
Yeah, I went for mine to load too.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it. What number are we doing? 6, right? Or 5?
Yours is actually, I think, sonnet 7. I skipped one because I realized I thought it was too hard. So, okay.
So we do 7?
Yeah. Yep. The
Okay,
one I just sent you.
thanks.
Yep. You're good. Okay. Are you there? I don't think he's there. Which one didn't I use? Oh. Not loading either. It's weird. Yeah, no kidding. I got excited. I'll give him a couple more minutes. Okay. People are coming back in. Was anybody able to successfully figure out their sonnet? Thank you, Henrik. Anybody get theirs? I don't know if you can hear my cat purring. Thank you. Paige, what sonnet did you guys have? Do you know? Or what was your song? Oh, you think you got yours? Wannabe. All right. Okay. So sonnet 7. And here's the sonnet. Do not rue the details of my past, or tarry on if love thy heart intends. Waste not my time, and our affair shall last if thou dost curry favor with my friends, right? So if you want to be my lover, you got to get with my friends, right? Isaac, what was yours? Do you remember? Anybody else? Oh, you had, oh, did I give you that one too? I must have given 2 people the same one. What about this one? Who had this one? The memory of her face shall long persist, for she could be the queen of beauty crowned. But I'll remember more for how she'd insist I was the one who danced within the round. The scene she the scene she caused made people turn their heads as she her name and slanders did impart. It called to mind advice I once heard said to act with caution round young ladies' hearts. My mother, too, had shared her deep chagrin that lies can swift be seen as gospel truth, and so I swear she ne'er my lover been, and I am not the father of this youth. No carnal act between us hath transpired, therefore the kid is not a son I've sired. Who had this one? Anybody have any guesses on this one? I may have reached too deep for this one. Sort of the end, I think, that would help the most with this one, right? Anybody got any guesses? Yeah, Paige has got it. Paige is on fire today. The end, right? I swear she ne'er my lover been, and I am not the father of this youth. Billie Jean is not my lover. She's just a girl who thinks that I am the one, but the kid is not my son, right? There's a whole, this is from a whole Tumblr. There's a whole Tumblr of this where it's just songs that they've sort of remade into Shakespeareized sonnet form, right? And I tried to pick some that I thought you guys might recognize. I picked Billie Jean because I thought, you know, you still hear it kind of a lot. This one, when age has taken movement from thy hips, when my legs don't work like they used to before. Right? So I don't know what's hip, right? Isaac, hips don't lie. Yeah. Okay, so for today, what do you have to do? Someone tell me, what is due today for you, my friends?
SLA essay.
Yes, right. Thank you, Gabrielle. Do your SLA essay by midnight tonight. Okay, that's what you got to do. Now, the other thing I need you to do, and it does not have to be due today, but I want you to do it by the end of the week. Okay, so if you go into our week this week, take a look at this communication rubric And all I need you to do is think about how you feel like you're doing right now on communication. Okay. So you're just going to sort of put down in this document where you think, how you think you're doing, and submit that, okay, in self-assessments. It doesn't have to be done today, just anytime this week. But I'm just asking you to sort of assess yourself. How are you doing with communicating with the groups, when you're in breakout rooms, when you're here in class, okay? And it's just, you do it, you get full points. You don't do it, you don't get the points, okay? I'm not grading you on like, are you a good communicator? I just want to see what you think, how you think you're doing. All right. SLA essay due by midnight. That's it from me. Remember to do your study island. No, Carrie, remember, you got to come back if you have not finished your map test. You got to go finish your map test. You got to come back to your advisory at 2 p.m. for study island. Okay. It is mandatory that you come back at 2. All right. So go have your lunch. And some of you I will see at 2 p.m. Otherwise, I will see you guys. Carrie, you got to come back at 2 anyway. Yeah. Where did you turn in the communication rubric? Is here at self-assessments. And then right here is the SLA essay. Yes, you do, Carrie. You do have to come back at 2. It doesn't matter if you already did it. You have to come back at 2 and check in. It is mandatory. Okay, so I will, if you don't have any questions, I will see you on Thursday. We'll have that conversation at 2 o'clock, Carrie, okay? You also have to make up yesterday's, so why don't you do that at 2 o'clock? Saeed, are you here? Do you have any questions for me? I will assume not.